The rain fell softly on the small town of Millbrook, Pennsylvania, as Officer Sarah Mitchell walked through the police station doors for what would be her final shift. She didn't know it yet, but this ordinary Tuesday morning in September would change everything. Sarah was 32 years old, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that had seen more than most people her age. She had served 2 tours in Afghanistan as a military police officer before returning home to join the Millbrook Police Department 3 years ago. The transition from military to civilian police work hadn't been easy, but Sarah was tough. She had to be. Well, look who decided to show up," Detective Frank Morrison called out from his desk, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He was a heavy-set man in his mid-50s with a mustache that seemed permanently stained with coffee. "Thought maybe you'd sleep in, Mitchell. You know, since real police work might be too hard for someone who just drove trucks in the sandbox." Sarah felt her jaw tighten, but she said nothing. This was Frank's daily routine. He never missed a chance to remind her that he didn't think she belonged here. Never mind that she had actually served as military police, not a truck driver. Never mind that she had faced dangers Frank couldn't imagine. In his eyes, she was just a woman trying to do a man's job. "Leave her alone, Frank," Officer Tom Chin said quietly from across the room, but his voice was too soft to carry much weight. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking," Frank continued, leaning back in his chair with his hands behind his head. "We got real cops here who have been doing this for decades. We don't need some girl playing soldier coming in here thinking she's special because she wore a uniform overseas." Sarah walked past him without a word and headed to the K-9 unit office in the back of the station. This was the only place she felt truly at peace. This was where her partner waited. As soon as she opened the door, a large German shepherd bounded toward her, tail wagging with pure joy. His name was Rex, and he was the best partner Sarah had ever had. Rex was 6 years old, highly trained and incredibly intelligent. More importantly, he didn't care that Sarah was a woman. He didn't care about her past or where she came from. He loved her unconditionally, and she loved him the same way. "Hey boy," Sarah said, kneeling down to scratch behind his ears. "Ready for another day?" Rex licked her face in response, and Sarah felt the tension from Frank's words start to melt away. She had been Rex's handler for 2 years now, ever since Officer Dan Peters retired. When she first applied for the K-9 position, Frank and several other senior officers had laughed openly at the idea. "A woman K-9 officer," Frank had said during the meeting. "Those dogs need a strong handler, someone they respect. No offense, Mitchell, but that dog's gonna walk all over you." But Chief Robert Henderson had given her a chance. He was one of the few people in the department who seemed to judge her on her abilities rather than her gender. And Sarah had proven herself. She and Rex had the highest success rate of any K-9 team in the county. They had found missing children, located drugs in traffic stops, and tracked down suspects who thought they had gotten away. Still, the respect from her fellow officers never came. To them, she was always going to be the outsider, the woman who thought she could do a man's job. Sarah clipped Rex's leash and led him out to the patrol car. It was a quiet morning in Millbrook. This town of 15,000 people didn't see much serious crime, mostly traffic violations, domestic disputes, and the occasional theft. But Sarah took every call seriously. She had learned in the military that complacency got people killed. Her radio crackled to life around 10 o'clock. "All units, we have a report of a suspicious person near the old Riverside warehouse on Industrial Drive. Caller reports a man acting erratically, possibly armed." Sarah grabbed her radio. "Unit 12 responding. I'm 2 minutes out." "Negative, Unit 12, the dispatcher's voice came back. "Detective Morrison is en route. Stand down." Sarah frowned. She was closer to the location than Frank could possibly be. "Dispatch, I'm already in the area. I can be on scene in 90 seconds. There was a pause. Then Frank's voice came over the radio, heavy with irritation. I said stand down, Mitchell. I don't need you or your dog messing up my scene. Go write some parking tickets or something. Sarah felt her face flush with anger, but she pulled her car to the side of the road and waited. This was how it always went. Whenever there was a potentially dangerous call, Frank found a way to shut her out. He claimed it was because she was inexperienced, but Sarah knew the truth. He simply didn't want a woman showing him up. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Sarah sat in her car, watching Rex in the rearview mirror. The dog sensed her frustration and whined softly. I know, boy, she said, I know. The radio exploded with noise. Officer down at the Riverside warehouse. All units respond. We need an ambulance now. Sarah's heart stopped. She slammed her foot on the gas pedal and raced toward the warehouse, lights and sirens blaring. When she arrived, the scene was chaos. Frank Morrison was on the ground, bleeding from his shoulder. Two other officers were taking cover behind their vehicles, guns drawn. A man with wild eyes and a gun was barricaded inside the warehouse, screaming incoherently. Mitchell, get back, one of the officers yelled. This is too dangerous. But Sarah was already moving. She released Rex from the car and assessed the situation. The suspect was firing randomly through the broken windows of the warehouse. He wasn't aiming at anything specific, which meant he was either high on drugs or mentally disturbed. Either way, sending more officers into the building would get people killed. Rex, track, Sarah commanded, using hand signals to direct the dog. Rex immediately went to work, circling the building to find the suspect's scent. Sarah followed, staying low and using the walls for cover. She could hear the other officers shouting at her to fall back, but she ignored them. This was what she was trained for. This was what Rex was trained for. The dog found a side entrance that had been left open. Sarah could smell chemicals in the air, probably a meth lab inside. That explained the suspect's behavior. She radioed her position and slowly entered the building with Rex at her side. The warehouse was dark and filled with old equipment. Sarah's flashlight cut through the shadows as she moved carefully through the space. Rex stayed close, his nose working constantly to track the suspect's location. Then she heard it, the sound of someone crying. It was coming from the back corner of the building. Sarah crept forward, her gun raised but her finger off the trigger. She didn't want to shoot if she didn't have to. Sir, she called out in a calm, steady voice. My name is Officer Mitchell. I'm here to help you. Please put down your weapon so we can talk. The crying stopped. There was a long moment of silence. Then a man's voice cracked and desperate. I can't stop seeing them, the faces. They won't leave me alone. Sarah recognized the signs immediately. This wasn't a criminal. This was a veteran having a mental health crisis. She had seen it before, both in herself and in fellow soldiers. The war followed you home, and sometimes it consumed you. I understand, Sarah said, lowering her gun slightly. I served too. I know what it's like when the memories won't stop, but this isn't the answer. Let me help you. You don't understand, the man screamed. Nobody understands. Rex growled softly, sensing the danger, but Sarah held up her hand to keep him calm. She took a slow step forward, keeping her voice gentle. I do understand. I was in Afghanistan, military police. I saw things that still wake me up at night, but I'm still here, I'm still fighting. And you can too. What's your name? Another long silence. Then quietly, Michael Tors. Michael, I need you to put the gun down, please. I know you don't want to hurt anyone. I can see that about you. You're not a bad person. You're just hurting. She could see him now in the shadows. He was young, maybe 25, with the same hollow look she had seen in the mirror after her first deployment. His hands were shaking as he held the gun. I'm so tired, Michael whispered. I just wanted to stop. I know, Sarah said, taking another careful step forward. But this isn't how it stops, trust me. I've been where you are. Let me help you find a better way. Michael's hands began to lower. The gun was pointing at the floor now instead of at Sarah. She could see his resolve crumbling, the wall of pain and fear starting to break. "That's good, Michael. You're doing great. Just set the gun down and we can get you the help you need." But before Michael could respond, the main door of the warehouse burst open. Frank Morrison, despite his shoulder wound, came charging in with two other officers. He saw Michael with the gun and didn't hesitate. "Drop it," Frank screamed, his own weapon raised. Michael panicked. Years of combat training kicked in and he raised his gun defensively. Everything happened in slow motion after that. Sarah saw Frank's finger tighten on the trigger. She saw the terror in Michael's eyes, and she made a choice. Sarah threw herself forward, knocking Michael to the ground just as Frank fired. The bullet meant for Michael struck Sarah in the chest. She felt the impact like a hammer blow, and the world spun around her. Rex erupted in barks and snarls, rushing to Sarah's side. The other officers swarmed Michael, wresting the gun from his hands. But Sarah barely noticed. She was on her back, staring up at the warehouse ceiling, feeling warm blood spreading across her shirt. Frank's face appeared above her, pale and shocked. "Mitchell, I didn't." Sarah tried to speak, but her lungs wouldn't cooperate. Rex was licking her face, whining desperately. She reached up with a trembling hand and touched the dog's head one last time. Sarah woke up in the hospital 3 days later. The first thing she saw was Rex's face, and for a moment she thought she had dreamed the entire shooting. But the pain in her chest was real, and the tubes running from her arms were definitely real. "Hey, you're awake," a nurse said, rushing to her side. "Don't try to move. You're going to be okay, but you need to rest." Chief Henderson appeared in the doorway, his usually stern face softened with relief. "Mitchell, thank God, you gave us quite a scare." Sarah's throat was dry. "Michael, the veteran, is he?" "He's alive," the chief said. "He's in psychiatric care at County Hospital. Thanks to you, he's getting the help he needs instead of a bullet. That was brave what you did. Stupid, but brave." "Rex," Sarah managed to ask. The chief smiled. "We bent the rules a bit and let him stay. He hasn't left your side except when the nurses forced him out for your surgeries. That dog is devoted to you." As if understanding he was being discussed, Rex put his head on Sarah's bed and looked at her with those intelligent brown eyes. Sarah managed to scratch his ears weakly. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah learned the full extent of her injuries. The bullet had struck her vest, but the impact at close range had still caused serious damage. 3 broken ribs, a collapsed lung, and significant bruising. The doctors said she was lucky to be alive. Another inch to the left and the bullet would have found the gap in her vest. During her recovery, visitors came and went. Tom Chen stopped by several times, bringing flowers and magazines. Chief Henderson checked on her daily. Even some of the other officers she barely knew came to wish her well. But Frank Morrison never came, and when Sarah asked about him, people changed the subject. It was Chief Henderson who finally told her the truth. "Frank's been suspended pending an investigation. Internal Affairs is looking into the shooting. There's a lot of questions about why he ignored protocol and stormed into that warehouse after being wounded. His actions put you and the suspect at risk." Sarah felt a twist of complicated emotions. She didn't like Frank, but she didn't want to destroy his career either. He was trying to help. "He was trying to be a hero," the chief corrected. "And his ego almost got you killed. The department is taking this seriously, Sarah. What you did in that warehouse. You saved a veteran's life. You de-escalated a dangerous situation the right way. That's what good policing looks like." But when Sarah was finally cleared to return to desk duty 6 weeks later, she found the atmosphere at the station had changed. The officers were divided into 2 camps, those who thought she was a hero and those who thought she had made Frank look bad. Frank himself was back at work, his suspension having been reduced to a written reprimand. He avoided Sarah completely, but she could feel his anger radiating across the room. She had embarrassed him. In his mind, she had proven that a woman could do the job better than him, and he would never forgive her for it. "Don't worry about him," Tom Chen told her one afternoon. "Frank's always been like this. He can't stand anyone being better at the job than him, man or woman." But Sarah did worry. She could see the way Frank looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. There was something dangerous in his eyes now, something that went beyond simple resentment. Rex noticed it too. Whenever Frank came near, the dog would position himself between the detective and Sarah, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Dogs had good instincts about people, and Rex clearly didn't trust Frank Morrison. It took another month before Sarah was cleared for full duty. The doctors said her ribs had healed well, though she would always have some pain in cold weather. Sarah didn't care about the pain. She just wanted to get back to work, back to doing the job she loved with the partner she trusted. Her first day back on patrol felt like coming home. Rex was beside himself with joy, practically dancing around the patrol car. For the first time in months, Sarah felt like herself again. "Unit 12, we have a report of a missing child in the Oakdale neighborhood." The dispatcher's voice came over the radio. "5-year-old Emily Rogers, last seen playing in her backyard at 3 o'clock. She's been missing for 2 hours now." Sarah's heart clenched. Missing children cases were every officer's nightmare. "Unit 12 responding. Send me the address." When she arrived at the Rogers house, a crowd had already gathered. The mother, Jennifer Rogers, was frantic, tears streaming down her face. "She was just in the backyard. I only looked away for a minute." Sarah put a gentle hand on the woman's shoulder. "We're going to find her. I have the best tracker in the county. What was Emily wearing?" Jennifer described her daughter's clothes, a pink shirt and blue jeans. She brought out one of Emily's stuffed animals for Rex to smell. The dog immediately went to work, nose to the ground, searching for the little girl's scent. Other officers had arrived and were organizing a search grid, but Sarah trusted Rex more than any search pattern. The dog moved with purpose through the backyard, past the swing set, toward the woods that bordered the property. "She wouldn't go in there," Jennifer cried. "She's afraid of the woods." But Rex was certain. He pulled Sarah toward the tree line, barking to indicate he had the scent. Sarah radioed her position and followed her partner into the forest. The afternoon sun was fatting, casting long shadows through the trees. Sarah called Emily's name as she walked, Rex leading the way with determination. They had been searching for 20 minutes when Rex suddenly stopped and began digging at the base of a large oak tree. Sarah's heart sank. No, please no, not buried, not this sweet little girl. But then she heard it, a small voice, muffled and scared. "Hello, is someone there?" Sarah dropped to her knees and looked into the hollow at the base of the tree. There, curled up in the small space, was Emily Rogers, dirty and crying but alive. "Hi, Emily," Sarah said in the gentlest voice she could manage. "My name is Sarah and this is Rex. We're here to take you home to your mommy." The little girl crawled out of the hollow, and Sarah wrapped her in her jacket. Emily was cold and scared but unharmed. She had been chasing a butterfly and gotten lost in the woods, finally hiding in the tree when it got dark and she got frightened. When Sarah emerged from the woods carrying Emily, with Rex trotting proudly beside her, the crowd erupted in cheers. Jennifer Rogers sobbed with relief as she took her daughter in her arms. The other officers clapped Sarah on the back, congratulating her and Rex for the successful find. Even Frank Morrison was there, watching from beside his car. For a moment, Sarah thought she saw something like respect in his eyes, but it was gone in an instant, replaced by that same cold resentment. Over the next few months, Sarah and Rex continued to excel. They found a missing elderly man with dementia who had wandered away from his nursing home. They located a cache of stolen goods in a drug bust. They tracked down a robbery suspect who had fled into the state park. With each success, Sarah's reputation grew. The local newspaper ran a story about her, calling her and Rex Millbrook's finest. The mayor mentioned her by name at a town council meeting. Parents started pointing her out to their children as an example of a hero. And with each accolade, Frank Morrison's hatred grew deeper. Sarah noticed the small things first. Her reports would go missing from her desk. Her patrol car would be assigned to someone else without explanation. She would be left out of important briefings. Nothing she could prove was deliberate, but the pattern was clear. Tom Chen pulled her aside one day in early spring. "Be careful around Frank. He's been saying things." "What kind of things?" Tom hesitated. "He's been telling people that you're getting special treatment because you're a woman, that the chief is going easy on you because he's afraid of a discrimination lawsuit. He's trying to turn the other officers against you." Sarah felt anger rise in her chest, but she pushed it down. "Let him talk. My work speaks for itself." "I know," Tom said, "but Frank has a lot of friends in this department. Friends who have been here longer than you. Friends who remember when the force was all men. Just watch your back." Sarah promised she would, but she didn't realize how serious the threat was until the morning of June 15th. She arrived at the station to find Chief Henderson waiting for her in his office, his face grave. "Mitchell, we need to talk. There's been a complaint filed against you." Sarah's stomach dropped. "A complaint for what?" "Excessive force during the warehouse incident. Frank Morrison has filed an official complaint claiming that you assaulted Michael Torres without provocation and that he was forced to intervene to protect the suspect's safety." Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. "That's not what happened. Frank knows that's not what happened. There were other officers there. There's bodycam footage." "I know," the chief said wearily, "and I've reviewed all the evidence. The complaint is baseless and I'm going to dismiss it. But Sarah, this is serious. Frank is making a play against you, and he's got some of the senior officers backing him up. They're claiming you've been getting preferential treatment, that you're not being held to the same standards as other officers." "Because I'm a woman." "That's my read on it," Henderson confirmed. "I'm on your side, Mitchell. You're one of the best officers I've got, but I need you to be perfect right now. Don't give Frank any ammunition. Follow every rule, document everything, and stay out of trouble." Sarah left the chief's office feeling like the walls were closing in. She had survived war zones and life-threatening injuries, but now she was being brought down by departmental politics and one bitter man's ego. Rex sensed her distress and pressed against her leg, offering comfort the way only a dog could. Sarah knelt down and hugged him, drawing strength from his unwavering loyalty. "It's just you and me, boy," she whispered, "like it's always been." But Sarah didn't know that the worst was yet to come. She didn't know that Frank Morrison's resentment had grown into something darker, something dangerous. And she didn't know that in trying to destroy her, Frank would set in motion events that would reveal the truth about his own corruption and ultimately cost him everything. The storm was coming, and when it broke, nothing in Millbrook would ever be the same. Summer arrived in Millbrook with heat and humidity that made even Rex pant constantly during their patrols. Sarah tried to follow Chief Henderson's advice, staying professional and documenting everything. But Frank Morrison's campaign against her continued to escalate. Other officers who had once been friendly now avoided her in the hallways. She overheard whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room. Someone keyed her personal car in the station parking lot. Anonymous notes appeared in her locker, calling her names and telling her to quit. Through it all, only Rex and Tom Chen remained loyal. And Chief Henderson, though Sarah could see the political pressure weighing on him. The mayor was getting phone calls. The police union was asking questions. Frank had painted Sarah as a divisive figure, someone whose presence was hurting department morale. "It's not true," Tom told her over coffee one morning in late July. "Most of the younger officers think you're great. It's just the old guard, Frank's buddies, who are making noise." "But they're loud," Sarah said, And they've been here longer, they have more weight. Tom nodded sadly. Yeah, that's how it works sometimes. The dinosaurs don't want to go extinct. The breaking point came on August 3rd. Sarah and Rex were on routine patrol when they pulled over a speeding vehicle on Route 32. It was a red pickup truck going 20 miles over the limit. Standard traffic stop. But when Sarah approached the driver's window, she immediately smelled alcohol. The driver, a man in his 40s with bloodshot eyes, fumbled for his license. "Have you been drinking today, sir?" Sarah asked, already knowing the answer. "Just a couple beers with lunch," the man slurred. "I'm fine to drive." Sarah asked him to step out of the vehicle. The man was clearly drunk, failing the field sobriety test badly. She was about to arrest him when he suddenly became aggressive, shoving her and trying to get back in his truck. Rex immediately sprang into action, barking and positioning himself between Sarah and the drunk driver. The man stumbled backward, then made the mistake of pulling his fist back as if to punch Sarah. "Rex, hold," Sarah commanded. The dog lunged forward, grabbing the man's arm in his jaws, not breaking skin but holding firm, the way he was trained. The drunk driver screamed and fell to the ground. Sarah quickly cuffed him while Rex released his grip. It should have been a textbook arrest. Drunk driver, resisting officer, K9 deployment by the book. Sarah called for backup and transported the driver to the station, documenting everything carefully. But the drunk driver's name was Gary Morrison, Frank's younger brother. Frank exploded when he found out. He confronted Sarah in the station parking lot that evening, his face red with rage. "You set this up. You targeted my brother because of me." "Your brother was drunk and speeding," Sarah said calmly, though her heart was racing. "He resisted arrest. I did my job." "You had that dog attack him. Look at his arm, you could have killed him." Sarah kept her voice steady. "Rex performed a standard hold. Your brother was not injured. The bodycam footage shows everything." "This isn't over, Mitchell," Frank snarled, stepping closer. "You've been gunning for me since day one. You think you're better than everyone else because you were in the army, but you're nothing. You're just a girl playing dress-up, and I'm going to prove it." Tom Chin appeared, placing himself between Frank and Sarah. "Back off, Frank. You're out of line." Frank laughed bitterly. "Of course you defend her, Chin. Everyone knows you've got a thing for Mitchell, but it won't matter. When I'm done, she'll be lucky to get a job as a mall cop." He stormed off, leaving Sarah shaking with anger and fear. She knew this was bad. Frank had been looking for an excuse to come after her, and she had just given him ammunition, however justified her actions were. The next week was a nightmare. Frank filed another complaint, this one alleging that Sarah had used excessive force during the traffic stop. He claimed she had targeted his brother deliberately and had ordered Rex to attack without provocation. He got statements from 2 other officers who witnessed Sarah's supposed vendetta against the Morrison family. Chief Henderson called Sarah into his office, and this time he looked defeated. "I'm sorry, Sarah. The mayor is demanding action. Frank's got the union backing him, and his brother is threatening to sue the department. I have to suspend you pending a full investigation." Sarah felt like the ground had dropped out from under her. "Chief, you know this is all lies, the bodycam footage." "I know," Henderson said, and he sounded genuinely pained. "I've seen the footage. You did everything right, but my hands are tied. The investigation will clear you, I'm sure of it, but until then you're on administrative leave. I have to take your badge and gun." Sarah unclipped her badge with trembling hands and placed it on the chief's desk. Her service weapon followed. She felt naked without them, like part of her identity had been stripped away. "What about Rex?" she asked, her voice breaking. Henderson looked uncomfortable. "Rex is department property. He'll need to be reassigned to another handler during your suspension." "No," the word came out fierce and final. "No, Chief, please. Rex is my partner, he needs me." "I'm sorry, Sarah, I really am. but those are the rules. Sarah left the chief's office feeling hollowed out. She walked to the K-9 unit, where Rex was waiting. The dog immediately sensed something was wrong, whining and pressing against her. "It's okay, boy," Sarah whispered, kneeling down to hug him. "It's going to be okay." But she didn't know if that was true. Tom Chen found her there 20 minutes later, still holding Rex, tears finally falling from her eyes. "This is so wrong," Tom said. "Everyone knows it's wrong." "But nobody's stopping it," Sarah replied. "Frank's winning, Tom. He's actually winning." "Not yet, he's not. I'm going to talk to the other officers, the ones who actually respect you. We'll fight this." Sarah appreciated his loyalty, but she knew how the system worked. Frank had seniority, connections, and now a narrative that painted her as the bad guy. Even if the investigation cleared her eventually, her reputation was damaged. Some officers would always believe Frank's version of events. The worst part came the next day when she had to watch someone else take Rex. The new handler was Officer Mike Stevens, a decent enough guy, but not someone Rex had bonded with. When Stevens tried to load Rex into a patrol car, the dog pulled against the leash, looking back at Sarah with confusion in his eyes. "I'm sorry, boy," Sarah called out. "I'm so sorry." Rex barked, a desperate sound that tore at Sarah's heart. He didn't understand why his partner was leaving him. He didn't understand why everything was changing. Sarah went home to her small apartment and cried for hours. She had survived combat. She had survived being shot. But this felt different. This felt like losing. The investigation dragged on for weeks. Sarah sat at home, watching the news, seeing her name dragged through the mud. Local talk radio hosts debated whether she should be fired. Online comments called her everything from a man-hater to a glory hound. Frank Morrison appeared on the local news, playing the concerned brother, talking about how his family had been targeted by a rogue officer. Through it all, Tom kept Sarah updated. He told her that Rex was refusing to work with Stevens. The dog was listless, not eating well, not performing his duties. Stevens had filed reports saying the dog was unmanageable and needed to be retired. "They're talking about sending him to a K-9 retirement facility downstate," Tom told her over the phone. "I think Frank's pushing for it. He knows how much Rex means to you." Sarah felt rage boil up inside her. This wasn't just about her anymore. Frank was willing to hurt an innocent animal just to get revenge. That was the moment Sarah decided to fight back. She hired a lawyer, using her savings. She filed a counter-complaint against Frank, documenting his pattern of harassment and discrimination. She gathered statements from officers who had witnessed his behavior. She even tracked down Michael Torres, the veteran from the warehouse incident, who was happy to provide a statement about how Sarah had saved his life while Frank had nearly killed them both. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Tom Chen had been doing some digging, and he discovered something interesting. Over the past 5 years, Frank Morrison had been involved in 17 traffic stops that resulted in cash seizures. The money was supposed to be logged as evidence, but Tom noticed discrepancies in the amounts reported. "I think Frank's been skimming," Tom told Sarah in a hushed phone call. "I can't prove it yet, but if we can get internal affairs to look into his old cases." "Do it," Sarah said, "whatever it takes." Tom went to Chief Henderson with his findings. The chief, already frustrated with the political circus around Sarah's case, authorized a quiet investigation into Frank's past activities. What they found was damning. Frank Morrison had been stealing from drug busts and traffic stops for years. Small amounts at first, 100 here, 200 there. But over time it had grown into thousands of dollars. He had been careful but not careful enough. Digital logs didn't lie, and forensic accountants could trace the money. The investigation into Frank's corruption was still ongoing when the unthinkable happened. On the evening of September 20th, Sarah received a phone call from Tom Chen. His voice was shaking. "Sarah, there's been an incident. Rex, he's been hurt, badly." Sarah's blood ran cold. What happened? There was a call, a domestic violence situation. Stevens took Rex for backup, but something went wrong. Frank was there and… "Sarah, Rex was shot. He's at the emergency vet clinic, but it doesn't look good. You need to get down here." Sarah grabbed her keys and ran for her car, her hands trembling so badly she could barely start the engine. The drive to the vet clinic was a blur of tears and terror. Not Rex. Please, God, not Rex. When she burst through the clinic doors, she found Tom waiting for her, his face pale. Chief Henderson was there too, along with Stevens and several other officers. And Frank Morrison, standing in the corner with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "Where is he?" Sarah demanded. "Where's Rex?" The veterinarian, Dr. Patricia Walsh, came out of the surgery suite still wearing bloody scrubs. Her face told Sarah everything she needed to know before she even spoke. "I'm so sorry," Dr. Walsh said. "We did everything we could, but the damage was too severe. The bullet hit him in the chest. He didn't make it. I'm so sorry." The world stopped. Sarah heard someone screaming, a raw animal sound of pain, and realized it was coming from her own throat. Her knees buckled, and Tom caught her before she hit the floor. "No," Sarah sobbed. "No, no, no, not Rex, please, not Rex." Through her tears, she saw Frank Morrison's face, and for just a moment she saw satisfaction there, a small smile playing at the corner of his mouth. That was when Sarah knew. This wasn't an accident. Frank had killed her dog. He had taken the one thing she loved most in this world, the one partner who had never abandoned her, and he had destroyed it just to hurt her. But Frank had made a mistake, because this time he had gone too far, and this time Sarah wasn't going to let him get away with it. The funeral for Rex was held 3 days later at the Millbrook Police Department's Memorial Garden. It was a small ceremony, but more than 24 officers attended, along with several civilians whose lives Rex had touched. The Rogers family came, little Emily laying flowers at the memorial stone. Michael Torres, the veteran Sarah had saved, stood in the back, tears streaming down his face. Chief Henderson gave a short speech about Rex's service and sacrifice. Tom Chen spoke about the bond between Handler and K9. But when it was Sarah's turn to speak, she found she couldn't. The grief was too fresh, too overwhelming. Instead, she simply stood beside Rex's flag-draped coffin and placed her hand on it. And she made a silent promise. She would find out the truth, and she would make sure Rex's death meant something. The investigation into the shooting was immediate but felt hollow to Sarah. The official story was that during the domestic violence call, the suspect had fired a weapon and Rex had been caught in the crossfire while protecting Stevens. Frank Morrison had returned fire, killing the suspect. It was being ruled a justified shooting. But Sarah didn't believe it. The details didn't add up. The suspect had a history of abuse but no history of violence toward police. The gun allegedly used was never recovered at the scene initially, only found hours later. And most damning of all, Frank had been the first one to fire his weapon, according to the ballistics report. Sarah spent her suspension doing what she did best, investigating. She interviewed neighbors near the domestic violence call. She pulled public records. She talked to anyone who would listen. And slowly, piece by piece, a different picture emerged. The suspect, Gerald Harris, had been dating Frank's cousin. There had been an altercation, yes, but witnesses said Harris was unarmed. He had been shouting but not threatening violence. When police arrived, Frank had immediately escalated the situation, refusing to let other officers try to de-escalate. Stevens, Rex's temporary handler, had been trying to calm Harris down when Frank suddenly drew his weapon. What happened next was chaotic, but several witnesses heard Frank shout "gun" before firing. Rex, trained to protect his handler, had lunged toward the perceived threat. And Frank had shot the dog, claiming later that he thought Rex was attacking him. Gerald Harris had died too, shot multiple times by Frank Morrison. With Harris dead, he couldn't contradict Frank's version of events. It was Frank's word against a dead man's silence. But Sarah had something Frank didn't count on. She had Tom Chen, who had been quietly building a case against Frank for months. And she had Chief Henderson, who was finally ready to act on what he suspected. The investigation into Frank's financial crimes had uncovered a pattern of corruption that went back years. More than $70,000 had been skimmed from evidence over the course of his career. The evidence was solid enough to bring charges. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Patricia Walsh, the veterinarian who had tried to save Rex, contacted Sarah with troubling information. The bullet that killed Rex had been a 9mm round, the same caliber as Frank's service weapon, but the trajectory didn't match the official story. The bullet had entered from the side, not the front, suggesting Rex wasn't facing Frank when he was shot. "He shot that dog in cold blood," Dr. Walsh told Sarah, her voice shaking with anger. "I see a lot of police dogs in my practice. I know what defensive wounds look like, what happens when a dog is shot attacking someone. This wasn't that. This was an execution." Armed with this information, Sarah went to Chief Henderson. She laid out everything she had discovered, every piece of evidence that contradicted Frank's story. Henderson listened in grave silence, his face growing darker with each revelation. "If this is true," he said finally, "Frank Morrison murdered a police dog and an unarmed man, and he did it to cover up his own crimes and to hurt you." "It's true," Sarah said, "and I can prove it, but I need your help, Chief. I need you to reopen the investigation." Henderson stood and walked to his window, looking out at the parking lot where officers were starting their shifts. "You know what this will do to the department? The scandal, the media attention. It'll tear us apart." "The department is already torn apart," Sarah said quietly. "Frank did that. He created a culture where officers like me are bullied and harassed, where good people like Tom Chen are afraid to speak up, where corruption is ignored because it's easier than fighting it. This is a chance to fix that, to show that nobody is above the law, not even a senior detective." The chief turned back to her, and Sarah saw something she hadn't seen before in his eyes: determination. "You're right. I've been too afraid of the political fallout, too worried about protecting the department's image. But that ends now. I'll authorize a full investigation, and this time we're going to get to the truth, no matter where it leads." The new investigation was swift and thorough. Internal Affairs, with cooperation from the state police, dug into every aspect of Frank Morrison's career. They interviewed witnesses, examined evidence, and most importantly, they looked at Frank's pattern of behavior towards Sarah Mitchell. What emerged was a clear picture of harassment, discrimination, and ultimately, criminal conduct. Multiple female officers came forward with stories of Frank's behavior toward them over the years, stories they had been too afraid to tell before. Each one painted the same picture. Frank Morrison believed women didn't belong in law enforcement, and he was willing to do whatever it took to drive them out. But it was the forensic evidence that sealed Frank's fate. Ballistics confirmed that Rex had been shot by Frank's weapon, and the trajectory matched Dr. Walsh's analysis. Rex hadn't been attacking Frank. The dog had been trying to protect Stevens when Frank shot him. More damning still, investigators found gunpowder residue on Gerald Harris's hands, but it was consistent with him having been near gunfire, not firing a weapon himself. The gun supposedly found at the scene had Frank's fingerprints on it, but none of Harris's. Frank had planted it. The arrest came on a gray morning in early October. Sarah wasn't there to see it, but Tom called her immediately. They got him. Frank's being charged with murder, evidence tampering, theft, and about a dozen other things. "He's done, Sarah. It's finally over." But for Sarah, it didn't feel over. Rex was still gone. Gerald Harris was still dead, and she was still on suspension, her career in limbo. That changed 2 days later when Chief Henderson called her into his office. Her badge and gun were sitting on his desk. "I'm reinstating you effective immediately," he said, "with back pay and a formal apology from the department. What happened to you was wrong, Officer Mitchell. What Frank Morrison did was inexcusable, and we should have stopped it sooner." Sarah picked up her badge, the weight of it familiar and comforting in her hand. "What about the charges against me?" "Dismissed, all of them. The investigation showed you acted appropriately in every instance. If anything, you showed remarkable restraint in dealing with Frank's harassment." Henderson paused, then added, "I'm also recommending you for a commendation for your actions in the warehouse incident with Michael Torres. You saved a man's life that day and showed what good policing should look like." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. "Thank you, Chief." "There's one more thing," Henderson said. "We're starting a new K-9 program, and I'd like you to oversee it. Train the next generation of handlers. Make sure they understand what you and Rex accomplished together." The mention of Rex brought fresh pain, but also something else, purpose. "I'd like that," Sarah said. "I'd like that very much." The trial of Frank Morrison became national news. A police officer who had killed a K-9 and an unarmed man to cover up years of corruption and harassment. The media descended on Millbrook like locusts, turning the quiet town into a circus. Sarah testified at the trial, telling the story of Frank's harassment and the events leading up to Rex's death. It was painful to relive, but she refused to let Frank's crimes be swept under the rug. Michael Torres testified too, describing how Sarah had saved his life and how Frank had nearly killed them both. The evidence was overwhelming. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Frank Morrison was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Sarah watched the verdict being read, feeling nothing but emptiness. Justice had been served, but it didn't bring Rex back. It didn't erase the months of harassment and pain. It didn't fix what was broken. But in the weeks and months that followed, Sarah began to see change. The Millbrook Police Department implemented new policies on harassment and discrimination. Officers received training on recognizing and reporting toxic behavior. 3 of Frank's cronies, the ones who had backed his lies, were forced into early retirement. Most importantly, the culture began to shift. Younger officers, ones who had quietly supported Sarah all along, spoke up more. Women in the department reported feeling safer, more respected. Tom Chen was promoted to detective, a position he had long deserved but been passed over for. And Sarah found her purpose in training the new K-9 unit. She worked with 4 new handlers and their dogs, teaching them not just tactics and procedures, but the importance of the bond between handler and animal. She made sure they understood that their dogs weren't just tools, but partners and friends. 6 months after Rex's death, the department held a dedication ceremony. A bronze statue was unveiled in the memorial garden, a German shepherd, alert and proud, with a plaque that read, "Rex, loyal partner, faithful friend, true hero." Sarah stood before the statue, Tom Chen at her side, and finally allowed herself to say goodbye. "You were the best partner I ever had, boy," she whispered. "I hope I made you proud." A voice behind her made her turn. It was Jennifer Rogers, holding Emily's hand, the little girl Sarah and Rex had rescued from the woods. "We wanted to thank you again," Jennifer said, "for everything. Emily talks about you and Rex all the time. She says when she grows up, she wants to be a police officer just like you." Sarah knelt down to Emily's level. "You know what? I think you'd make a great police officer, and maybe someday you'll have a partner as good as Rex was." Emily smiled and hugged Sarah, and in that moment, Sarah understood something important. Rex's death hadn't been for nothing. His legacy would live on in every officer Sarah trained, in every life saved by a K-9 team, in every little girl who saw that women could be heroes too. The final vindication came a year later. The State Police Association awarded Sarah its highest honor for bravery and dedication to duty. At the ceremony, Chief Henderson gave a speech that brought many in the audience to tears. "Sarah Mitchell represents the best of what law enforcement should be," he said. "She faced discrimination, harassment, and violence, yet she never compromised her integrity. She saved lives, served her community with honor, and exposed corruption at great personal cost. She is a reminder that justice isn't just about enforcing the law, it's about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Sarah accepted the award. But when she gave her acceptance speech, she didn't talk about herself. She talked about Rex, about loyalty, sacrifice, and the importance of never giving up on what you believe in. "My partner couldn't be here tonight," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion. "But everything I've accomplished, I accomplished because he believed in me. Even when others doubted, even when I doubted myself, Rex never wavered. He taught me that true strength isn't about being the biggest or the loudest. It's about being faithful. It's about showing up every day and doing the job, no matter what anyone says." She paused, looking out at the audience of officers and community members. "We lost a good dog and a good man because of one person's hate, but we gained something too. We gained a reminder of why we do this job, to protect people who can't protect themselves, to stand up for those who are bullied or afraid, to make sure that justice isn't just a word but a reality." The standing ovation lasted for 5 minutes. 2 years after Rex's death, Sarah was promoted to sergeant. She continued to run the K-9 program, which had grown to include 8 teams and was considered one of the best in the state. Officers came from across the country to train under her. She never got another K-9 partner of her own. That bond was too special, too personal to try to replicate. But she poured her love into training others, making sure every handler understood the sacred trust between human and dog. On quiet nights, Sarah would sometimes visit the memorial garden and sit by Rex's statue. She would tell him about her day, about the dogs she was training, about the officers who reminded her of herself when she was young and determined to prove herself. And sometimes, when the wind blew just right, she could almost feel Rex beside her again. That steady, comforting presence that had gotten her through the darkest days. The partner who had refused to leave her side, even in death. Frank Morrison died in prison 3 years into his sentence. Heart attack. Sarah felt nothing when she heard the news. He had made his choices and he had paid for them. That was justice enough. But the real legacy wasn't Frank's downfall. It was the change he had unwittingly sparked. The Millbrook Police Department became a model for other departments struggling with discrimination and toxic culture. Sarah's story was taught in police academies as an example of resilience and integrity. And every officer who graduated from the K-9 program carried a patch on their uniform, a silhouette of a German shepherd with one word beneath it: faithful. On the 5th anniversary of Rex's death, the town of Millbrook held a memorial run. Over 200 people participated, running the route that Rex had so often patrolled. The money raised went to fund veterinary care for retired police dogs. Sarah ran too, with Tom Chen and Chief Henderson and a dozen K-9 officers beside her. At the finish line, they released balloons into the sky, each one carrying a message of thanks to the dogs who served alongside their human partners. Sarah watched the balloons drift upward, carrying her own message. "Thank you, Rex, for everything. You were the best of us." That night, Sarah got a call from one of her trainees, Officer Maria Santos. "Sergeant Mitchell, I wanted you to be the first to know. Luna and I just found a missing child, a little boy who wandered away from a picnic. He's safe now, being reunited with his parents, and I just wanted to say thank you for teaching me what Rex taught you, that this job isn't about glory or proving ourselves. It's about service. It's about being there when people need us most." Sarah felt tears roll down her cheeks, but this time they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of pride and gratitude. Rex's legacy lived on, in every dog who tracked a missing person, in every handler who put their life on the line to protect others, in every officer who stood up against injustice, even when it was hard. The police dog had refused to leave his officer's coffin because dogs understand loyalty in a way that humans sometimes forget. They understand that love doesn't end with death, that service means something, that the bond between partners transcends time and space. And when the truth finally broke everyone, the truth about corruption, about hate, about how far one man would go to destroy another, it also revealed something beautiful. The truth that courage can come from the quietest places. That strength isn't always loud or obvious. That's sometimes the smallest among us. A woman underestimated, a dog devoted beyond reason, can change everything. Sarah Mitchell had been insulted, mocked, and underestimated. She had been shot, suspended, and stripped of everything she loved. But she had survived. More than that, she had won. Not because she had destroyed Frank Morrison, he had destroyed himself, but because she had stayed true to who she was, had fought for what was right, and had honored the memory of the partner who had never doubted her. And in doing so, she had become exactly what the world needed. A hero who understood that real strength lies not in domination, but in dedication. Not in tearing others down, but in lifting them up. Not in seeking glory, but in serving faithfully, one day at a time.